Well, I can see a question over there. Somebody named Anix has asked the meaning of Atmanirbhar. Well, Aniket, that is pretty much self-explanatory. Atmanirbhar is self-dependent. You depend on yourself, not anybody else. That is what is Atmanirbhar.
Are there any more questions on the floor? Since there are none, we would move on to our next speaker. The country Taiwan's immediate response to coronavirus, the preventive measures that the government took, and its citizens' response. On December 31st, Chinese officials notified the World Health Organization that China had several then unknown pneumonia. And that same day, the Taiwan Center for Disease Control began monitoring passengers who arrived in the country from Wuhan. Taiwan has only 441 confirmed cases and 7 deaths. Taiwan asked and received permission to send a team of experts to the mainland on a fact-finding mission on January 12th. By late January, Taipei had established a central epidemic command center, centralizing policy measures to protect public health. By late January 26, Taiwan became the first country to ban flights from Wuhan. Around the same time, the government banned the export of face masks and ensured they were affordable by capping prices at about 17 cents. By late February, Taipei had distributed nearly 6.5 million masks to primary and secondary schools, as well as after-school institutions, plus 84,000 liters of hand sanitizer and 25,000 forehead thermometers. Taiwan's health insurance lets everyone not to be afraid to go to the hospital. If you suspect you have coronavirus, you won't have to worry about that you can't afford the hospital visit to get tested. You can get a free test. And if you're forced to be isolated during the 14 days, the government pays for your food, lodging, and medical care. It takes an entire country to keep people safe, and Taiwan's extensive coordination and swift action have helped stem the tide of coronavirus cases in the country. Taiwan confirmed the first case of infection from the new coronavirus on Tuesday. A woman in her 50s who had returned to the island after working in the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the outbreak began. Professor Zhen Zhu, the former director of Taiwan's Center for Disease Control, explained that Taiwan has prepared for a pandemic since the SARS outbreak of 2003, which mostly affected China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Nursing homes were given thousands of ventilators, and the number of intensive care beds was increased to 10,000. That figure is 4 times Australia's 2,500 beds, even though the two countries have similar populations of around 25 million. Aggressive testing, contact tracing, and isolation of the sick was set in motion after detecting the first positive case of coronavirus. Taiwan's government learned from its 2003 SARS experience and established a public health response mechanism for enabling rapid actions for the next crisis. Well-trained and experienced teams of officials were quick to recognize the crisis and activated emergency management structures to address the emerging outbreak. The CECC has rapidly produced and implemented a list of at least 124 action items, including border control from the air and sea, case identification, quarantine of suspicious cases, proactive case finding, resource allocation, reassurance and education of the public while fighting misinformation, negotiation with other countries and regions, formulation of policies toward schools and childcare, and relief to businesses. Taiwan's citizens' household registration system and the foreign entry card allowed the government to track individuals at high risk because of recent travel history in affected areas.
1,162 have recovered, which is more than 90%, and there is 264 deaths. South Korea had the best immediate cause and helped to eradicate coronavirus partly. They used a method called as contact tracing. All started here in Daegu, a city in South Korea, where a woman went to a hospital with a fever because the already equipped hospitals with coronavirus tests, doctors were able to test her. She tested positive and known as patient 31. But the testing didn't stop there. While she was sick, patient 31 had gone to a mega church where she sat with a crowd of people for more than an hour. So they traced her movements, identified people she had come in contact with, and tested those people as well, whether they showed symptoms or not. Many of them tested positive, so they were quickly isolated and treated at home or a center. And then all the people they had been in contact with were traced and tested too. This is known as contact tracing. And from this method, they stopped spreading coronavirus, and everyone right now is living a normal life. The other main step they took was the come forward, get tested strategy. The spread possesses the big threat, yet to the Asian nations, success in curbing its epidemic through rapid and widespread testing. Instead of imposing strict restrictions on people, movement, and business activity, which is in one word known as quarantine, South Korea has relied on its testing program, which allowed officials to identify and isolate those infected before they can spread the pathogen to others. This was taken from the pandemic which occurred in South Korea in 2015, which is known as MERS. The strategy relied on people's willingness to get tested and volunteer personal information. For months, it worked. From late April until the most recent outbreak, Seoul saw the number of new daily cases drop.
Presenting New Zealand for today's webinar. Be strong, but be kind. We will be okay. Thus spoke the redoubtable Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, to end her daily briefings on the pandemic to her nation. New Zealand, which confirmed its first case on February 28, a New Zealand citizen in her 60s who had recently visited Iran and returned home via Bali. She arrived on February 26 at Auckland. The initial 2 tests came negative, but a third test with a more specific sample turned out positive. She was moved immediately to the Auckland City Hospital. Following this, the government extended the travel restrictions to include travelers from Iran. On February 13, the government banned all flights from mainland China. Flights from other hotspots like Hong Kong, Japan, and Thailand were also banned. Before the flight bans were put in place, the New Zealand citizens stranded in Wuhan were airlifted on a special flight and got back home. They were quarantined for 14 days at a military base close to the airport. On March 23rd, New Zealand announced harsh lockdown measures. At the time, only about 100 people in the country had tested positive for the virus, and no one had yet died. We must go hard and we must go early, Ardern said some days prior to announcing what she described as the world's toughest border restrictions. Thereafter, they sealed the borders for all, except citizens in permanent residence, cancelled all large gatherings and events to prevent spread. Strong contact tracing and elimination was the buzzword. Citizens were required to stay at home unless it was absolutely necessary to go out. Only the business is absolutely essential to ensure the necessities of life, such as supermarkets and pharmacies, could stay open. If in doubt, the business premises should be closed. Since the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, New Zealand had pursued a policy of elimination, resulting in strict lockdown measures. Despite New Zealanders being hit hard by loss of income, social isolation, and radical changes in sport and recreation, the country came together. Political leaders also united across the political divide. During a national emergency, we discover how well or poorly a country is governed. But New Zealand's success in working towards eliminating COVID-19 isn't just due to leadership from the top. It's been a collective success involving most ordinary Kiwis across political divides. Now the question arises, what India should learn from New Zealand? The major factor that one can stress on from the successful campaign by New Zealand was the quick response in unity amongst the government, the opposition, and the population as a whole. Everybody pitched in with a sense of positivity. Most importantly, that we should never attach stigma to the COVID positive patients and the frontline medical staff. New Zealand encouraged COVID patients to share their daily routine during quarantine on social media, thereby helping out to put a message that it was a manageable thing and people need not hide their symptoms, nor should the others shun such patients. One learned about the do's and the don'ts. While the seriousness was not lost, yet the lightness of daily routine helped remove the stigma. As regards citizens, the most important thing is to put trust in the government and unite to make the policies a success. Strong testing had New Zealand doing 2,090 tests per 1 lakh citizens, which was amongst the highest. Compare this with Korea and USA with around 1,200 and 1,450 tests per lakh of population respectively. It's been a pleasure to have shared with you all the New Zealand experience with coronavirus. Thank you. Now I leave the floor open for any relevant questions.
For New Zealand, we would be entertaining the first 3 questions. And that's Ayman. Ayman, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening to one and all. I am Ayman Parmar, and today I am here to talk about the condition of USA during the COVID-19 pandemic. There are 1.61 million cases in the US, out of which approximately 308K have recovered and approximately 95,000 people have passed away. Starting with the first confirmed case, according to the New York Times, the first case in the United States was discovered on 20th January 2020 in the Snohomish County of Washington. After he was confirmed of contracting coronavirus, the patient was admitted to an airborne isolation unit at Providence Regional Medical Center for clinical observation. The NY Times further reported that the initial response of the US government to the pandemic was otherwise slow in terms of preparing the healthcare system, stopping other travel, or testing for the virus. In extreme instances, a number of cities and states had imposed lockdown measures which limit where people could travel, work, and shop away from their homes between March 15 and April 11. On 31st January 2020, the Trump administration suspended entry into the United States by any foreign nationals who had traveled to China in the past 14 days, excluding the immediate family members of American citizens or permanent residents. By this date, 213 people had died and nearly 9,800 had been infected worldwide. On February 25, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warned the American public for first time to prepare for a local outbreak. US officials approved widespread testing on March 3. Furthermore, the CDC lifted all federal restrictions on testing for the coronavirus, according to Vice President Mike Pence. On March 13, President Trump officially declared a national emergency and said he was making $50 billion in federal funds available to states and territories to combat the coronavirus. He also said he would give hospitals and doctors more flexibility to respond to the virus, including making it easier to treat people remotely. Now coming to the response of the citizens, NDTV reports that hundreds protested in cities across America against coronavirus-related lockdowns, with encouragement from President Donald Trump, as resentment grew against the crippling economic cost of confinement. An estimated 400 people gathered under a cold rain in Concord, New Hampshire, many on foot, while others remained in their cars, to send a message that extended quarantines were not necessary in a state with relatively few confirmed cases of COVID-19. In Texas, more than 250 people rallied outside the state capitol in Austin, including far-right conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, founder of the Infowars site, who rolled up in a tank-like truck. Due to negative response of the people, the state governments decided to ease their lockdowns and resume normal operations, which did not have favorable results and resulted in US being the #1 country having the most number of cases. Now, what should India learn from USA? We should have a rapid response regarding border closures, community lockdowns, event cancellations, and school closures. India can learn to launch an aggressive testing campaign to identify as many people as possible. India can focus on building the public health equivalent of a fireball around the country to prevent the influx of coronavirus from overseas. Thank you. And now I open the floor for all the questions.
We will be entertaining first 3 questions in the chat box. You can start sending in your questions.
First cases were officially confirmed in Europe. In a study published in the International Journal of Microbial Agents, doctors at a hospital north of Paris, which is the American Hospital of Paris, reviewed retrospective samples of 14 patients treated for a typical pneumonia between early December and mid-January. Among those was a patient, Amirouche Hammer, a 42-year-old fishmonger from Algeria, who has lived in France for years and had no recent travel history. They said perhaps he had an infection, a pulmonary infection, although it was not certain. But what he had was very serious because he was coughing blood. It was not a normal flu. Hammer was admitted to the hospital with symptoms doctors say were consistent with COVID-19 patients in China and Italy. When doctors retested his old sample, they found it was positive for the coronavirus. Identifying the first infected patient is of great epidemiological interest, as it changes dramatically our knowledge regarding the spread of the virus. Dr. Wes Cohen said that he had a swab taken at the time of treatment and was recently tested and came back positive for COVID-19. The patient was treated by macrolide antibiotics, which are a strong solution for pneumonia, but it had no effect on him. What were the preventive measures taken by France? President Emmanuel Macron said France will guarantee up to 300 million euros of bank loans to companies. Government will also allow companies to delay paying taxes and social security contributions and help them to delay loan payments. On March 10, 2020, all countries of the European Union are now affected by COVID-19. France has also given a huge amount for its tourism sector to help the patients affected. Currently, there are about 144,556 cases of virus in France, about 2,155 deaths per million people, about 64,209 recovered, and about 28,289 deaths. So now what was the citizens' response? Over 170 million people are locked down across Europe. Europe has closed its external borders to non-residents. They have issued a form which is known as Certificate of Derogatory Travel, which is a straightforward form. In a nation known for its centralized system of government, forms are nothing new. But this one represents a remarkable curtailment of freedom in the country built on the concepts of liberty and equality. France is in lockdown now, and citizens are not permitted to step outside their front door without completing the form. They must state the justification for being outdoors, and if they don't have a good reason,
they are liable to be fined for $146. Now, what is the medical progress? Globally, there are more than 90 vaccines are currently being developed globally, with 8 in the clinical trial phase. But experts say the process could take years. Sanofi Pasteur is a multinational company in France and is using the technology of recombinant DNA, a variety of DNA created by merging the genetic material of different organisms to develop a potential vaccines. Sanofi has said that America would be the first in line, and if successful, then the vaccine would have no borders. So now the question is, why did France fail to give the immediate response to coronavirus? Many were shocked to see France, a country once famed for its strong social security system, fail to respond to this public health emergency efficiently. However, the French healthcare system was struggling long before the start of corona. Last December, for example, 22 babies infected by bronchiolitis in Paris had to be transferred to Rouen, Amiens, and Reims because emergency pediatric services in the capital were too overwhelmed to take care of them. So how exactly did a country which was praised by American documentary maker Michael Moore as a healthcare paradise end up in this situation? The reason is, in 2019, France experienced one of the longest and most widespread strikes in its recent history. In response to the changes President Emmanuel Macron proposed to make to the pension system, which affected the pension and salary of the government doctors. Hospital workers also attended these protests, not only to protect their pension, but also to demand better working conditions and funding. During these protests, some even carried banners that read, "The state count the money, we will count the dead." But sadly, the government chose to ignore their plight.
The other 5 panelists that India can undertake from these countries. So things that India could learn from South Korea would be the use of contact tracing, the use of come forward, get tested strategy, and the citizens should help and react positively. Many things that India can adopt from Taiwan would be use of technology to detect and track the cases, ensure availability of supplies, and also the Taiwan's health insurance. Things India can learn from the USA would be a rapid response regarding border closure, community lockdowns, etc. India should launch an aggressive testing program for the COVID-19 tests, and India can focus on building the public health equivalent of a firewall. Things India can even learn from New Zealand would be ensure very strict lockdown measures which help eliminating COVID-19 faster. Also, the people should support the government policies. The Prime Minister should address the people more often, since the PM of New Zealand addresses the people daily, which helps encourage the citizens. And not to stigmatize COVID positive patients. In New Zealand, these people are encouraged to share their stories online. Many mistakes made by France from which India can learn would be France had banned all non-essential travel into the country on 6th April, and India banned it on 22nd March, which was 15 days earlier than France. Evacuation operations were delayed in France, unlike India, which caused the rise in the number of affected people. European meeting was held late, and thus they were backward in group planning and implementing policies, unlike SARC meeting taken up by India. So guys, with this, we conclude with our today's webinar. I hope that you all liked it, and do not forget to tune in tomorrow at the same time to get some more information about the preparation of vaccines and many more such interesting and mind-boggling topics about the current situation.
A very heartwarming welcome to our live audience on the second day of our webinar, Back to the Future, by we, the students of NL Dalmia High School. Before moving forward, I would like to sincerely thank our lovely audience for staying on with us so patiently till the second day of our webinar. So as we move forward, with our today's webinar based on the present scenario of this pandemic-affected world of novel coronavirus or COVID-19. The first thought that mostly strikes our brain is the fact that how we are all forced to unwillingly abandon our social lives and quarantine ourselves. The way we all are sitting trapped and goofed up in our happy homes, relishing our family time, yet isolated from the entire world physically, but obviously connected through various other virtual platforms like news channels, social media, etc., linking the entire nation into a single chain of hope and dedication to overcome this drastic dilemma. So now I, Ms. Ananya Rai, with 5 other panelists, are here on the line to throw some light upon the burning facts during this life in lockdown and interact with you on few major matters. And the chronology goes like this, wherein we have a first panelist, Master Garvit Agrawal, to enlighten us with the major impacts on our economy, such as how our GDP and share market graphs have declined, and the significant losses in every major and minor businesses and in various fields, be it hospitality or banking sector, etc.
Okay, so good evening to one and all viewing the webinar. I, Garvit Agarwal from class 10, studying in the NL Dalmia High School, will be talking about the effect of COVID-19 on the Indian economy. India, as we all know, is an ambitious and a developing country. It had recently set up a target for an economy of 5 trillion American dollars, which was called unimaginably ambitious by several economists. But just when India was well upon its path to success, the COVID hit hard and started dragging it back. India is renowned for its fight against struggles and its victories too, but this villain is second to none. Estimations show that India might lose over 4% of its GDP permanently. The stock market investors have already lost over 12 lakh crore rupees in just 6 trading sessions. It is predicted that India is to lose about $1 trillion due to the coronavirus outbreak, which would be a great loss for India. But for India, the lives of its people are far more important than the money spent in saving them. The country is ready to revive the lost money, the lost fame, and the lost economy with its task force. Every coin has 2 sides. And from such a situation, which cannot be changed anyways, we can just get the most benefit by focusing over the positive side. So for us Indians, the lockdown is an opportunity to show our unity to the world. The economy may revive, but the lost men, once lost, cannot be revived again. The RBI Governor, Shashikant Das, and the Finance Minister of India, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, have continuously appeared in front of the public and announced changes in dates for payments and all other facilities that could indeed be a lot of relief to traders. The Indian economy is currently under great pressure, but we all need to realize that a diamond is nothing but a chunk of coal that had performed indeed well under pressure. The world waiting on the other side is very beautiful, and there are no shortcuts to a place so worth going. The novel coronavirus has given us all a chance to find a new someone in ourselves. It has given the time to those who never had it. Once the danger subsides, the economy would start rising appreciably if Indians repeat history by embracing Swadeshi, thus encouraging more and more local trade and employment. The Indian government is taking efficient and positive steps to boost the Indian economy. Recently, the Finance Ministry had issued a package of rupees 20 lakh crores to take the economy on path. Further, the RBI Governor is also announcing the steps to improve economy. Nothing that comes our way really goes away before teaching what we really need to know. So, instead of panicking, it is our duty to learn what the situation is trying to teach us and be the flow instead of simply going with it, hoping Even I am sure that we Indians will win over the COVID pandemic and the Indian economy will cross the predetermined targets. Thank you. And now open the room for the questions.
Garvit, how do you think that enforcing the principles of Swadeshi will play its role in Indian economy thereafter at vital points?
Okay, so thank you for the question. So, how Swadeshi would help us? How Swadeshi would help the Indian economy, right? So, what I would like to say is that once the lockdown is over, India has defeated the pandemic. The traders and businessmen will start with their work, the profession. So now, imagine, I'll explain this with the help of an example. Imagine you intend to buy gold jewelry, and you have two options. One is to buy it from your parents' shop, and one from a neighbor's shop. If you buy it from your parents' shop, the profit that the owner of the shop earns remains in your home. But if you buy it from a neighbor's shop, the profit earned is gone. It's not yours. Simply, if you buy Indian products and use them, the profit remains in India itself. It's with the Indians. But if you buy from foreign nationals and foreign companies, the profit is simply lost. It is going to other countries. So Swadeshi would indeed help us.
Wow, Garvit, that was quite an explanation. Thank you. And if Indian government is really taking steps to revive the economy, so how far do you think they are being really successful and effective at it?
See, it is not really necessary that if we take a step towards something, the results are visible as soon as the steps are taken. But once the lockdown subsides, the lockdown is over, the trade begins, and there are people who are buying things, selling things as normally as it used to happen earlier. They will benefit from the results, from the steps taken by the government, and the results will show up. Thank you.
Thank you, Garvit. And I think the panelists and the others too found your speech quite appealing, so we have no more questions here. We next move with our next panelist, Master Akshat Singh, to show us the revolution caused in the education system and how digital and unstoppable has the teaching learning process evolved.
Thanks for the introduction, Ananya. First of all, good evening to all of you. My name is Akshat Singh, and I'll be throwing light upon how this lockdown has changed our education system in India and at a global level. Now, since the few weeks the lockdown in India has been lifted, the government has putting strain on Bharat Padhe Online to push India towards learning virtually rather than offline. This COVID-19 pandemic has broken our perception of what is normal, of what is normal lifestyle. Every strata of our society has been affected equally by this virus. One such critical area where the change is evident is education. Aside from all the disruptions faced by this virus, education in our modern world has faced several changes in these few weeks. The world is in a lockdown, but not education at all. Technology in this phase has emerged as a major lifesaver. I can say that technology is the pivot around which the whole of our education system is rotating right now. Needless to point out that this pandemic and this lockdown has transformed our centuries-old chalk-talk teaching model to the one that is driven by technology. In India, there have been many effects of this lockdown. I'll be highlighting on some of them. First of all, due to this lockdown, many of the examinations in India have been suspended, and for which lakhs of aspirants sit every year, such as JEE Mains, NEET, CS Executive Exam in the commercial field. Now, highlighting the steps taken by Indians as a whole, schools in India have been taking initiative to conduct online classes for their students so that they do not lag behind. Ministry of Human Resource and Development in India has been giving guidelines to state education ministers to go on with their education online. In this time, teachers are implementing innovative methods to teach their students. Apps like Cisco WebEx, Google Classroom, Zoom app are being used to provide lectures online to the students. In India, the Indian Council for Secondary Education has taken the initiative to reach out to its students through the medium of television on the channel ABP Ananda for the standards 9th to 12th, and for standard 3rd to 8th on the channel News 18 Bangla. COVID-19 has boosted the online education platform. Now I'll be highlighting some of the effects worldwide. In Australia, there is school held every 1 day in 1 week. Also, social distancing norms are followed. In China, school is fully functional. The teachers stress on following social distancing and personal distancing norms, while the use of sanitizers is mandatory. The special thing implemented in Netherlands is that they have created plastic shields as cubicles around their students so that they never come in contact with the student sitting next to them or the one sitting behind them. Overall, our education system right now is in good hands. Over 1.5 billion school-going students are studying online, and only in India, 60 million college students are sitting at home preparing for exams. In this pandemic, aside from our doctors, our workers in the essential services, even our teachers are playing a role and are helping us equally fight this pandemic. A huge thank you to all of them. I now open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Akshat. Well, we do have a question for you. That what do you think are the initiatives taken by educational platforms in India?
In answer to that, I would say that yes, many initiatives have been taken by the government, by educational platforms. To cite an example, I would say that, as I earlier mentioned, Indian Council for Secondary Education has taken the initiative to reach out to its students through the medium of television. Online edtech platforms like Unacademy, Byju's, Khan Academy have been working in the same direction. One of its app, Unacademy, has been working in this direction and has provided 20,000 lectures to all the students in India for free, and also opened a platform for Plus subscription for a 1-month trial. Thank you.
Okay. And how long do you think can we continue with this technology-driven educational system?
As far as I see the situation, right now, our education system is stabilized. There is no problem right now. Yes, the rural people, the rural students have to face some problems, like some lack internet facilities, and some do not have stable connections. The government is looking into that, but yes, we can continue with this kind of education for a longer period of time, but let's not hope that we should have to continue.
Okay, so with this, we come to an end for your questions. Moving forward, we have a third panelist, Master Kishan Dubey, to make us aware about the vital role played by social media platforms striving to fight against the pandemic, and new trends and live shows setting on air to keep the audiences busy and safe in their houses, even permitting them to video chat with their friends and family to keep them all togetherly linked. And we even have nowadays many social influencers coming up to support, motivate, and inspire the audiences more than ever while entertaining them at the same time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kishan Dubey, and today I am going to speak up on the topic how social media is thriving to fight against the pandemic. In the face of COVID-19, when the people are physically separated, the social media platforms are playing a vital role in keeping the authorities, communities, and individuals connected. During the time of 1918 flu pandemic, as the CDC estimates, it infected a third of the world's population, and the people did not have the same sources of communication as we have now in the 21st century. According to the public health report on the 1918 flu pandemic, the people did not have the same sources of communication. All the critical information were passed on to the people via postal workers, Boy Scouts, and teachers. Can you imagine that in the 21st century, there are Boy Scouts on your doors, knocking on your doors, and encouraging you to wash your hands regularly? In the advent of the social media in the 21st century, we are not only getting the latest news updates, but we are also using some social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter to share our private and business updates. For business, it means leveraging the social media to support the workers and the customers. And for the government, it means that they should use the social media to share on the factual and up-to-date information to the people. Nowadays, the business agencies, individuals have been using the social media platforms to interact with each other. Thank you. Any questions?
Kishan, would you please like to express your views regarding the rumors spreading through social media platforms about corona pandemic, and how can one break the chain for it?
Thank you for the question, Ananya. Yes, during this crucial period where everyone are at their home due to coronavirus, people seek to gain information through social media. But there are many rumors that are being circulated through the social media. This has a very negative impact on our society, and the people are being misled. So we should avoid spreading and believing the rumors and gain information from the trusted sites only.
And would you please throw a little more light on the info of number of cases of this virus and about the government actions taken by the government for the same through the said platforms?
Yes, the government is taking several actions to avoid the spread of this virus. The government is providing the poor ones with necessary resources. The government has also taken the initiative to get back the stranded Indian students and citizens from different countries. It has also converted the Indian Railways into quarantine coaches for the isolation of the affected people. So yes, the government also plays the important part in stopping the spread of this harmful virus. Thank you.
Thank you, Kishan. We also request our audience to ask their questions, if any, for any of our panelists if they wish to. And moving forward, we have our next panelist, Master Aryaveer Singh, who would like to discuss about the pros and cons of the news channels and various sources of information, which nevertheless keeps us all updated, but at times could also create anger and tension due to fake news during such tense situations. Let's hear more about these from him.
Thank you, Ananya. Good evening to everyone present in the webinar. Today, I, Aryaveer Singh, will be talking about the pros and cons of news channels and social media during this COVID-19 lockdown. So as we may be knowing, social media is a vessel of information for everybody, and what we put out there will affect not only our life, but it will also affect those that read what we publish. News sites and social media feeds are updated every second with new data from regular users who share news, events, experiences, and the latest topics. Users passionate about social media strive to keep up to date with every single detail that happens on their web communities and can handle the non-stop data coming at them. Social media also plays a very crucial role in connecting people and the government, and also provides a great opportunity to establish customer service by gathering input, answering questions, and listening to their feedback. With these things said, now I would like to highlight the pros or the advantages of news channels and the sources of information. Number one, TV makes us a witness to important events in real time. Second point, it can be used as a very powerful tool for verification. Third, it gives us a personal storytelling experience and creates a strong connection to the people in the news. And the last point, it can create a national shared experience
to make the public aware about the pandemic. Please express your views for it.
I'll say news media has done 50% of its work. It has created awareness amongst the people, but it has not entirely educated them in this matter, or has not relayed the complete knowledge or the knowledge which is required for this during this pandemic. But nevertheless, it has done its work partially correct, and hopefully, in the future it will correct its mistake and do what needs to be done.
Thank you, Aryaveer. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Guys, you're free to ask the questions if any. Moving forward with it, we have our last panelist, Ms. Suhani Mishra, who is here to throw light upon the aspects of this lockdown on our mother nature and the considerable decrease in the rate of global warming. And I would also like to share with you guys a little fact that due to this significant decrease in the pollution levels during lockdown, the ozone hole over Antarctica is now seems to have completely closed. Let's hear more about these from Suhani.
Good evening, everyone. I would be talking about the wholesome effect of this lockdown on the nature. I would like to start with a small quote. Nature is so varied in the mode of action, so multiple in the manifestations of its power that we have no right to set any limits to its capabilities. The nature seems to be healing itself during this lockdown. Due to the decrease in the industrial activities and road traffic, there is a decrease in the level of air pollution. The emission of greenhouse gases has decreased on a global scale. The European Space Agency has recorded that the levels of nitrogen dioxide over the industrial areas and the urban cities has reduced by 40 to 60% in Asia and Europe. There is also a decrease in carbon dioxide levels by 17%. This has helped us to reduce the cases of respiratory tract diseases. We frequently hear on the news channels that how cleaner the river Ganga and Yamuna are flowing from the Kanpur, Varanasi and Delhi's Karindi Kunj respectively. The beaches in India are more cleaner because there is less disposal of waste in them. And also there is a halt in the industrial pollutants and the waste which were released in them. We also hear that how the snowy peaks of Himalayas are visible from the Jalandhar district of Punjab after 30 years. These ranges were hidden behind the clouds and the smog since years. There is also an increase in the visibility of animals and birds which were not noticed previously. Dolphins and flamingos are spotted in the waters of Marine Drive, and this case is not only in India but also in Italy and other countries as well. Previously, these animals were not visible and were far away from the shore because of the human activities. Now, keeping aside the positive impacts of this lockdown, there are also some negative ones. Now, the people are staying in their homes in this difficult weather, and they more frequently switch on their air conditioners and all, which release some harmful greenhouse gases, which contribute to the pollution level. And secondly, the medical wastes are the most common non-biodegradable waste which are released from the hospitals and clinics nowadays, and they also contribute to the pollution. But definitely the positive impacts of this lockdown surpasses the negative ones. Thank you. Now I open the floor for any questions.
Suhani, we just received a question for you. That would you please like to express your views about how a global battle against coronavirus could help us fight the climate change?
Thank you, Ananya, for the question. I feel that this invisible virus has made our individual actions more visible. It has revealed to us that how, as a community, as a society, we can fight against anything. We now understand that how we are interdependent, and with this spirit, we can not only eradicate the virus, but also protect our nature and clean it. The COVID-19 pandemic awakens us to a reality that staying at home, we share a responsibility, and not only individually, but as a whole, to save our nature. And as the points that I mentioned earlier about the cleaner environment, the visibility of animals, birds and mountains tells us that we have set foot on a journey to save our nature. Thank you.
And Suhani, we got one more question from the audience that do you feel that during such a lockdown and situation of corona, nature is sending some kind of message to the mankind?
I think yes, the nature is sending us a message that the improving conditions of the nature, as I mentioned earlier, it states that the nature has the capability to heal itself, and it also tells us that how if the humans cannot control their activities, they can at least support the nature, and rest the nature can handle itself.
Kabir asking that which is better, online learning or practical learning as we used to do before? Well, Kabir, we can't distinguish practically which is better, but each and every side has its own pros and cons. We are doing online learning now because we have no option, yet we used to do it before too, but not on such large scales. But even though practical learning still have its quite more advantage, as I feel personally, because of the surrounding and the environment and the physical work we use. We come to the end of our interaction session with you guys. Thank you so much. And with this, we would like to conclude our today's webinar and would want to once again express my gratitude to all of you on behalf of our entire NL Dalmia team for being such a lovely and interactive audience. And we shall see you tomorrow again on the third and the last day of our webinar that shall talk about the future of this lockdown situation. Till then, stay safe, stay home. Goodbye, everyone.
Everyone, myself Shubhi Agarwal and I'll be your host for today. So let's start. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. We all know that the best view comes after the hardest climb. This, what we're going through, is a hard climb, but the rainbow will soon come. So I welcome my friend Meloni Tang to continue.
Good evening, everyone. So I'll be talking about life in schools after the lockdown ends. So what would be our life in schools after the lockdown ends? The lockdown will certainly not go on forever. So it is necessary to take some precautionary measures in order to lead a not so normal life. Now we are being taught by the means of virtual classes, but sooner or later, we will attend our schools. Just imagine, sitting in a classroom, one bench apart from each other, attending the lecture while wearing masks and gloves, not being able to share your tiffins, not being able to attend any sports lectures, being so close yet so far. Wouldn't it be a unique yet traumatizing experience? There are so many possibilities as to how our lives could change after the lockdown ends, but I have broken it down into 5 points which I feel will be effective. First up, no time in the playground. As awful as it sounds, there will be restrictions on activities like games, contact sports, and competitions. Non-essential gatherings can and should be restricted until the virus is completely eradicated or there is a vaccine made available. Second, staggered classes. A change in timings of different grades would make it easier to avoid overcrowding around the entry and exit points at the beginning and end of the day. Even a 30-minute difference would allow the students to not be exposed to too many people. Similarly, lunch breaks can also be staggered for different grades so that they can easily avoid contact. Third, smaller and continuous classes. If our class strength is very big, we can definitely make it smaller given the current situation. A distance of at least 3 feet should be maintained, which means that the desks need to be arranged in a similar manner. The school should ensure that there is minimum or no breaks between the classes in order to avoid contact during this time. 4. Increased use of artificial intelligence. From kindergarten to graduate high school, artificial intelligence will impact education through the application of greater levels of individualized learning. The future could see more students being tutored by tutors that only exist in zeros and ones. It can help students through basic mathematics, writing, and other subjects. These programs can teach students the fundamentals but so far aren't ideal for helping the students learn higher order creativity and thinking, something which the real world teachers facilitate. Yet, we shouldn't rule out the possibility of artificial intelligence tutors being able to do these things in the future. With the rapid pace of technological advancement that has marked the few decades, advanced tutoring systems may not be a pipe dream. And lastly, but not the least, hygiene. Face masks and gloves will be made mandatory across all sections. Use of sanitizers is of utmost importance. Along with it, bleed stations, strategic sanitization centers, infrared cameras will be something which we will be seeing quite commonly. Our schools will definitely take some precautionary measures, but as we know, self-sufficiency is the greatest of all wealth. So we have come up with 4 pillars to help us cope with this difficult situation. First up, distancing. The novel coronavirus spreads primarily through respiratory droplets released when people cough, sneeze, or even talk. And this is why physical distancing norms are very important. Second, masks. A study published says that a surgical mask, if worn properly, can block up to 99% of respiratory droplets released by people with coronavirus. But at the same time, the police force, along with the doctors and nurses, are in dire need of masks, much more than the general public. So make your own mask campaigns should be supported and promoted. Next, hygiene. As said before, hygiene plays a very important role during these difficult times. Washing our hands for at least 20 seconds is absolutely essential. And lastly, culture. So why culture is the 4th pillar? People tend to focus on 2 things, safety and freedom. But now, people need to become increasingly concerned with keeping others safe too. It means taking the risks of COVID-19 seriously and choosing to stay home even for a runny nose or a sore throat. And this kind of behavior needs to be encouraged. I will be curious to see that whether this, the new normal, is just a bump along the way or a path-changing reality. But the new normal is already here, and the changes go way beyond the masks you have to wear. There is no going back to normality. This is the new normal. Thus, I would like to conclude by saying a few words by the famous Japanese author Haruki Murakami. I quote, "Once the storm is over, you won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in." Thank you. And now I open the floor to the panelists for any questions.
Very well spoken, Melanie. So I would like to ask you a question. What is your take on how is education going to evolve after the lockdown?
Thank you, Malvika, for that question. So my answer would be, the course learning and the way that curriculums are taught may change. The aspects that were considered fundamental to education will be revised and will largely accommodate life skills which are essential for the future. There would definitely be a tight relationship with technology. The future of education will find no room to ignore the utilization of technology, and it may be the best platform to empower learning in such an age. Thank you. Anybody else?
Tony, I would like to ask you,
Yes.
how can artificial intelligence help in online learning?
So, artificial intelligence. So, based on the students' interests, like the likes, dislikes, strengths, and weaknesses, the artificial intelligence software can help in providing accurate process and content and methods to educate the students in the perfect manner.
I don't think the audience would like to ask any questions further to Melanie, and I would also request the audience to keep their comments very respectful and to the point according to the speech. So, moving on to our next topic, which is nature. Allow nature's peace to flow into you as sunshine flows into trees.
I have a question for you. So, what measures can be taken by the industries to stop pollution which is spreading around?
they can measure their waste, because until and unless they will measure their waste, they will not know that how much waste they are creating and how to reduce it. And one more thing, that we are drinking bottled water a lot, and so like tapwater.org had written that in UK there are 38 billion of water bottles being used every year, and only 25% of them are being recycled. And so we can say that only 18 millions of bottles are being recycled. No, 18 million of bottles are landfilling. So it can be really harmful for our land, for our environment.
Thank you, Rishika, for your valuable answers. Moving on to our next panelist, Ms. Malvika Bejal, who would speak upon the topic sustainability.
So, good evening, my fellow panelists and everyone watching this webinar. I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Malvika Bejal, and I am a student at NL Dalmia High School, grade 9. As quoted by Abraham Lincoln, you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. So today I would like to talk about how the importance of sustainability is the hour of need after the pandemic. In environmental sustainability, we need to focus on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future and enable the earth to continue supporting life. Since the fast-spreading COVID-19 outbreak is declared as a pandemic, use of masks, PPE kits, and sanitizers have increased. The most widespread of these precautions is the extensive use of surgical masks. It is natural not to consider the environmental impacts of these masks in the midst of the pandemic, but attention must be paid to an environmental problem that will far exceed that of the virus. These masks are made up of non-woven fabric such as polypropylene, which does not break down easily. Hence, environmentalists fear negative consequences to the environment. Given that surgical masks are supposed to be worn by one and all, their disposal, along with that of empty hand sanitizer bottles and other clinical wastes, are a threat to the animal's natural habitat, be it land or water. Not only that, but also, if not disposed properly, certain portions of the population are at a risk of adverse impacts from exposure to medical waste as well, such as cleaners, garbage collectors, etc. The spotlight should be on medical waste treatment management around the world and step up their coronavirus specific decontamination services as one of the solutions. It is also each individual's responsibility to follow the necessary guidelines while disposing of their medical gears. Our waste management companies need to be more sustainable and have programs to prevent another crisis causing significant harm to the environment. Another solution would be to regulate the materials used for the masks. Evidence suggests that reusable masks perform most of the task of a single-use mask without the associated plastic waste. The wearing of reusable masks by the public could avoid 66,000 tons of contaminated plastic waste being generated in a year. Hence, the government must mandate reusable masks instead of single-use masks. In addition, there should be public health campaigns which provide clear instructions about how to wear, remove, and disinfect the reusable masks. We need to unmask the environmental impact, and we will see the world emerge stronger from this global pandemic. Well, that's all I've got to say.
I would like the audience to state any of their questions in the chat box. Please do not unmute yourself. And moving on to the next part of our webinar, I would like to quote Ronald Reagan. Government's view of the economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it. We all know that there can be economy only where there is efficiency. So to be efficient, I would like to call upon Ms. Riva Singh to talk about Indian economy.
A very good evening to one and all. Today I'll be talking about how this economic bane can be converted into a boon for India. The economic impact of the 2019-20 coronavirus pandemic has been largely disruptive for the economy. The World Bank and other agencies have rated India's economy to the lowest levels India has seen in the last 3 decades. There has been a rise in unemployment from 6.7% last month to 26%. 14 crore people across the nation have lost their jobs. Also, 47% of the households have seen a dip in their income as compared to the previous year. But to achieve India's goal of becoming a $5 trillion economy by the year 2025, the economy will have to grow at a rate of 8% per year, and the exports of India will have to grow at an even higher rate. Thus, I would like to quote Dr. Ghosh, a member of the SBI, who told us how this pandemic can be turned into an economic boon for India. He said, although 2020 is a lost year, in terms of trade, India can think long term and build relations so that it can occupy the market share vacated by China. India can look into the range of incremental increases of exports going from $20 billion to a whooping $193 billion in the next 5-year horizon. But this is possible only if India increases its capabilities and captures the share from China. Taking a look at Vietnam, which has captured most of the merchandising exports, we get to know that most of the companies which were set up in China and are Chinese owned are being set up in Vietnam. I unquote. Thus, to increase India's economy so that the unemployment levels can be reduced to, it is essential for India to improve its infrastructural facilities and also to make the approval process for the factories being set up in India quicker so that we can achieve our goal. In the end, I would like to quote our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji, who said, "We walk together, we move together, we think together, we resolve together, and together we will take our country, our India forward." Thank you. Now, I would like to open the floor for questions from the panelists.
I would like to ask you a question. So, which steps do you think should be taken by the government to get the economy back on track?
Thank you so much for the question, Milani. In the last 3 decades, China has become the global factory. The disruption in supply of finished goods, of global markets, and raw materials has made people aware of risks of concentration. One cannot put all their eggs in the China basket now. Thus, if India decreases its approval time, and makes it quicker for the factories to be set up in India, it will prove to be a boon, and India will be able to capture the market share vacated by China, and the economy will be back on track. Thank you.
So, Riva, I would like to ask you a question. I'm curious to know that how do you think will the unemployment levels go down?
Thank you for the question, Malvika. I think once India approves the setting up of factories, the unemployment, which is majorly caused to the laborers, will go down because they will be required not only for building these institutions, but also to work in them. This will also provide an impetus to the Make in India campaign and will help in the growth of the local markets. So approval of these institutions quickly in India will provide a good impetus to employment and will help to reduce unemployment. Any more questions from the panelists?
Riva, I would like to ask you one question. My question is, what do you think is the main aim of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan?
Thank you so much, Shubhi. A very nice question you have asked here. The Self-Reliant India Mission, or the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, aims towards avoiding unemployment turning into hunger and illiquidity turning into insolvency. It aims at cutting down import dependence by focusing on substitution, by improving safety compliance and quality of the goods to gain the global market share. The mission will help to improve the Make in India campaign and also give a boost to the local markets and always help in reducing unemployment levels. Now, I would like to open the floor for questions from the audiences.
I think the audience is filled with questions and bubbles in their mind, because the first question is from Manshi Gautam. She says, what do you think can the government do to give people their jobs who have lost them?
Currently, government cannot give jobs to people because we are in a state of lockdown and working and gathering in places is not allowed. So the government has started the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, which has various things in it. The government has allotted 20 lakh crore to the scheme, which helps the poor people by giving them not employment as of now, but by giving them food, which is the need of the hour. Also, since we are talking about setting up factories in India, the government can act as the contractor, the labor contractors who can ask the laborers to migrate back to the places where they had their jobs and to the places where these institutions are being set up, and hence they can get their jobs back, and maybe this will help to improve our economy, if not get it back on track. Any more questions?
The second question is a very interesting one, asked by Geet Malhotra. She says, can you please elaborate about the Cobra effect? And do you feel that the Atmanirbhar Bharat will have a Cobra effect?
Okay, so Cobra effect, I think many of you might not know it. So I'd like to elaborate on it a bit. So the Cobra effect, the name is taken from an incident which happened in the British rule in India, in Delhi to be precise. So there was an influx of cobras, the snakes, in Delhi. So what did the government do? The government set up rewards. They said that people who kill cobras and get them to us, we'll be rewarding them. People started doing it and earning rewards for the thing they did. But soon, the people who were quite smart in India, they started breeding those cobras. And since they were breeding cobras, the numbers increased more. The government then thought that this is such a bad thing, and the government stopped giving rewards. The people who were now left with worthless cobras just set them free. And then again, there was an influx of cobras in Delhi. So the Cobra effect means when a policy is being introduced without taking into account all the aspects related to it, and then that policy just backfires on you. So, and the second part of the question was, Shubhi, that will the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme have a Cobra effect?
Yes.
Okay, so as of my viewpoint, I don't think that the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme will have a Cobra effect because it has been formulated taking into account all the aspects of Indian society, from the cottage industries to the farmers, and everybody has been taken into account. So I think it will not have a Cobra effect, and I hope that it does not have a Cobra effect so that our economy prospers. Any more questions?
Thank you so much, Riva, for elaborating on those 2 points. I know everybody was interested to hear about the Indian economy, but we have a larger insight before us. That is the world economy. So I would like to call upon Ms. Sanvi Mishra to elaborate upon the same.
Good evening, one and all present over here. Today, I, Sanvi, will be addressing everyone about the impact of COVID-19 on world's economy. With more than 20 lakh people infected worldwide and 1.27 lakh deaths, COVID-19 pandemic shows no sign of abating. As vaccine is yet to be found, lockdown remains the only way to slow its spread. However, the lockdowns are also pushing the major economies to a brink. the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has revised its global GDP growth estimate from 3.3% just 3 months ago to a contraction of 3%, something which is not seen since the Great Depression of 1930s. Now, I would like to highlight a few topics. My first topic is about how the global shares have taken a hit. Big shifts in stock markets where shares in companies are bought and sold can affect the value of pensions or individual saving account. The FTSE, Dow Jones Industrial Average and the Nikkei have also seen huge fall in the outbreak since it began on 31st December. The Dow and the FTSE saw the biggest drops in the first 3 months of the year since 1987. In response, the central bank of many countries, including the United Kingdom, slashed the interest rates that should, in theory, make the borrowing cheaper and encourage the spending to boost the economy. My second important point is about the oil prices which have taken a crash. Demand for oil has all but dried up as the lockdown across the world have kept people inside. The crude oil price had already been affected by a row between OPEC and the group of oil producers and Russia. COVID-19 has driven the price down further. Brent crude is the benchmark used by Europe and the rest of the world. Its price dipped below $20 to the lowest seen ever in 18 years. In United States, the price of barrel of West Texas Intermediate WTI turned negative for the first time in the world history. My next topic is about the impact of COVID-19 on traveling. Travel is amongst the hardest hit. The travel industry has been badly damaged, with airlines cutting flights and customers cancelling business trips and holidays. Governments around the world have introduced travel restrictions to try to contain the virus. In the US, the Trump administration has banned travelers from European airports from entering the US. Data from the flight tracking service Flightradar24 shows that the number of flights globally have taken a huge hit. Lastly, I would like to speak about the impact of COVID-19 on factories of China. In China, where the coronavirus first appeared, industrial production, sales, and investment all fell in the first 3 months of the year, compared with the same in the period of 2019. China makes up the third largest manufacturer globally and is the world's largest exporters of goods. Restrictions have affected the supply chain of large companies such as the industrial equipment maker JCB and car maker Nissan. Shops and car dealerships have all reported a fall in Chinese market. I would like to end my speech by thanking everyone for listening to me with all your patience and attention. Now I open the floor for any questions.
Tanvi, I have a question for you. Do you think COVID-19 can be an opportunity to boost Madagascar's economy as a result of COVID organic?
Thank you, Shika, for your question. Madagascar is one of the poor countries in the world with 75% of the population living on less than $1.90 a day according to the World Bank. It is a proud country today because it provides the COVID organics, which is CVO, which provides a marked improvement in the health of the sick people within 24 hours and cures them from after 7 to 10 days. But I wouldn't think that this will help it to boost its economy because there is no vaccine yet from World Health Organization, that there is no medicine that has shown to prevent or cure COVID-19.
Santi, I would like to ask you a question. So as we know, the Nigerian economy has suffered very badly due to the fall in the oil prices. So what do you think Nigeria should do to absorb these negative effects because of its fallen economy?
Fall in oil prices has an adverse effect in overall economy of Nigeria because Nigeria was heavily dependent on oil. But my opinion is that crisis of coronavirus is temporary and the countries must absorb the lowering of its income. This can be accomplished by a freeze out of the running development projects. The budget must be recognized to sustain the society, especially the poor people.
Chat box is flooding with them.
And I would also like to thank many of our audience to provide insights upon the Spanish flu, like Kartikeya, Sahu, etc., etc. So I would like to thank our very cooperative audience. And I think my friend Malvika Bejal is ready with some very beautiful poetry written by herself. So I would like to welcome my panelist, Malvika Bejal.
Thank you, Shubhi. So I've written a small piece of poetry expressing my feelings during this pandemic, and here it goes. So when we recover, what shall we do? Will we be stronger from what we've been through? Or will we be wiser and start anew? The world is broken and it's our only home. It needs to heal because we have nowhere else to go. We know storms don't last forever and the sun will shine brighter. The playgrounds will open again. The school bells will ring again. Our lives will be normal again. A new world awaits, but it is up to us. The future is in our hands. What shall we do? Ask yourselves these questions, my friends. Let us mend our ways and learn from our mistakes. Let us create a better world. Let us be ready for a change. Let us emerge wiser and stronger. Let us do things right today and create a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Brilliantly stated, Malvika. I would really applaud you for that. Hats off to you for writing such a good article. I would also pick up one of her point that it is you who can make the difference. She has rightly stated that nobody else can save you from this hard time. It is you who can make the efforts to end this lockdown. I would request all of our audience to be positive because I can see the chat box filled with concern about how the COVID-19 will reflect in the next years and how will everything come to normal. I would request everyone to be as positive as they can, as cooperative as they can. Our government is trying really, really hard to cover on this pandemic, and we are doing really, really great because of such a positive attitude from the people as well as from the government. And I would like to hear from different panelists if they want to say something.
I think Shubhi was extremely correct, and I mentioned before, it is really important that each and every one of us stay positive. We have been through so many different diseases as of now, and we should not take fear from this COVID-19, as this too will pass. I think that's all I have to say. I would pass.
So, as we all know, part of the journey is the end. And fortunately or unfortunately, we have come to the end of this session. I would request Maloney to conclude it.
Thank you so much, Rima. So what will be life after the pandemic? The post-epidemic stage will see the emergence of a new human being whose daily behavior and thinking will differ from what it was before the COVID-19 outbreak. Yes, the life will be different, but we need to be positive rather than being negative. We have seen so many other diseases which do not have a sure shot cure, but we are still living with those diseases among us. Corona will be one of them, which we need to accept until we have a cure or a vaccine to eliminate this fear from our minds. The youth will play a very important role in the post-COVID-19 situation. The youth is set to embrace the efforts and to protect themselves and the overall population. The youth is in a position to help those who are the most vulnerable and to aid in increasing public health social awareness campaigns among their communities. Thus, the youth are critical to limiting the virus's spread and its impact on public health, society, and economy at large. It is also very important that the scientists and biologists discover the cure against this virus or develop a vaccine to prevent mankind from this disaster. So with this, we come to the end of our webinar. I hope all of you found it informative. I would like to thank our principal and CEO, Ms. Seema Saini, our secondary vice principal, Ms. Annie Michael, our secondary supervisor, Ms. Savita Kukreti, the school management, along with Seema Singh Miss and all her teachers, for giving us, the students of NL Dalmia High School, this priceless opportunity to present our thoughts before all of you. I would also like to thank our wonderful audience for being the part of this webinar and helping us make this show a success. Thank you all for attending the webinar. Stay home, stay safe, and make the most of this lockdown. Thank you.
If you would like to address students, please, I request you to address them. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there was a phone call and I had to just step out of that. Children, you all were excellent, very articulate, very clear. And I think must compliment you for taking this initiative, children, all of you. And you have really made me proud, made the school proud, especially because you're showing your awareness, having a worldview of things, and being updated completely as to what needs to be done. And it's really nice to know the perspective which students enjoy. And we've got a lot of inputs from what you said, whether for school or we are working in the background. In the background, we are also at it. The world order is changing. There is a new approach to everything, the new normal, how it needs to be tackled. So we are looking at all of that as well. And how as schools we would reopen, we understand it's all going to be in phases. But yes, the management and behind the scenes, a lot of work is happening. We've already installed thermal cameras, and the thermal temperature recorders are going to be there at 2 levels at the security. And then we have the sanitizing booths, and the manpower is being trained to handle sanitization on a continuous basis. So the number of people employed in the manpower required for housekeeping has increased. So all of that behind the scenes, a lot of work is going on, just to assure you all children and your parents that, yeah, things are changing. It's very, very different. Now suddenly it is, contactless approach is supposed to be there. Suddenly it's taken an individualistic aspect. The society is looking at things differently. Though it is definitely helping nature and the environment, but human interactions are going through a sea change. And I'm sure what comes out of it is going to be, again, there would be a phase to this and then another phase. And let's see how the whole thing goes on. Right? So well done, children. Great work and proud of you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much, ma'am.
Viewers have
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for your precious time, one and all present here. See you very soon. So these students will come up with such webinars again and again, and they will be presenting their potential in different forms. I'm sure of that. All the best, students. God bless you all. Stay safe. Stay